So again, just kind of a parental warning, if you will, but any of our children under the age of 13, they may want to step out during this sermon because of the adult content of the words I'm going to share this evening. So let me just wait 30 seconds or so for any of our children, the parents would like for them to step out during my talk, which will be about 10 minutes or so. So I hope you'll come back right when I'm done. Lou, you can stay. It's okay. Yeah, exactly. So good Shabbos again, everybody. It's great to see everybody. So many smiling faces, so many people here this evening. We celebrate life tonight. We have a wonderful bat mitzvah. But I want to share something I was very troubled about recently, a story that came out of Israel. But this story has nothing to do with terrorism, the upcoming Israeli election, or secular Orthodox tensions. Rather, it's about something that affects us here in America as well. You may have heard the story. Last week, a dozen Israelis, ranging in age from 15 to 18, were arrested in Cyprus, the small island nation not far from the state of Israel. They are arrested because a 19-year-old British woman accused these Israeli teenagers of raping her in a hotel room. As you can imagine, the allegation of gang rape at the Cyprus resort produced about a national soul-searching throughout Israel. But the story took a dramatic turn this past Sunday with the release of the teenage Israeli suspects. The teens were released after the 19-year-old British woman revised her testimony, saying that the group sex with all the Israeli teenagers was consensual, explaining that she filed the complaint because she felt humiliated. The authorities in Cyprus released the Israeli teens without condition, and they arrested the British woman on charges of making a false accusation. Of course, I was glad to hear that the teenage boys were no longer being accused of rape, but I was still troubled. Very troubled. Yes, of course, the 19-year-old British woman had made a poor choice. But the Israeli teenagers not only engaged in a very inappropriate sexual act, they also secretly filmed the sexual acts without her consent. And afterwards, they treated this woman like trash, calling her names and kicking her out of their hotel room. The teenage boys said they regretted nothing. And here's the worst part. When the boys returned home to Israel this past Sunday night, they were treated like heroes. The scene at Ben Gurion Airport on Saturday evening was nauseating. The boys, I believe, had done nothing to make their families proud. But with many family members and friends on hand, spontaneous celebrations broke out at the airport with dancing. Choruses were sang of Am Yisrael Chai, or Our Father in Heaven, how good is God, and as well as chants of the Brit is a whore. They opened champagne bottles. They sang an anthem of the Jewish people to celebrate the humiliation of a young woman. Parents quoted biblical verses to praise their son's release. They put on kippot while their parents led this barbaric celebration. The father of one of the youths told the press that this is an apparent act of God. The teens were portrayed as heroes by older men because they had sex with a young woman. It was like a hero's welcome, except they were not heroes, just some morally ambiguous Israeli teenagers. Yes, of course, they should indeed feel gratitude and joy at the charges being dropped, but I believe there was nothing in their behavior that warranted a celebration. That they were vindicated of gang rape does not translate them into being heroes of any sort. As the editorial board of the Jerusalem Post wrote, the cavalier attitude expressed by the teens and their families about their sexual exploits should be disturbing for us all. Some of the adult men at the airport celebration, fathers and other family members, actually said that the boys, by going to Cyprus and doing what they did, had become real men. Real men? One Israeli educator named Aldin Salvia put it perfectly. Real men do not take advantage of vulnerable women. Real men do not film themselves engaging in group sex. Real men never use women and discard them like inanimate sex toys. Real men do not call the women who they've had been intimate with whom they've had the privilege of being intimate, whores. And real men do not celebrate their sons' sexual endeavors, especially ones like this. I was embarrassed as a man. I expect more. I was ashamed as a Jew. I demand more. And no matter what the law says, no matter if the sex was consensual, no matter how many songs are sung or bottles of champagne opened, what these teenage boys had done was nothing to be celebrated. Instead, I ask, where were the real men who, instead of celebrating, would have told those teenage boys that they were a moral disgrace and a disappointment to true masculinity? And where were the real men who had clearly never taught these boys about healthy sexuality and how you should always treat a woman, no matter the circumstances? Of course, our brothers and sisters in Israel are not alone. We have the same issues here in America. Too many boys growing up never learning how they should properly treat a woman. I see it too often. You hear about it as well. It should be no surprise that we continue to hear horrific stories of sexual abuse coming out every single day. Harvey Weinstein, Bill Cosby, Charlie Rose, R. Kelly, Jeffrey Epstein. The list seems to go on and on and on. And too often, Jewish men are involved. And they bring only disgrace to our people. In this day and age, too many young people have a hard time finding proper public role models. And it becomes even more incumbent on us, fathers, grandfathers, uncles, friends, men in the community, to demonstrate to our boys now, while they're young, what is and what is not okay. Especially in a culture where it seems that there are no limits and everything is permissible. In a time where more than ever before, in the game changer of the internet and cell phones, smartphones, children from the youngest of ages are exposed to almost anything online, too often the crudest, most violent, and most abusive version of human sexuality. One Israeli writer put it best: it is up to us, without exception, now to sit with our children as soon as possible and talk about healthy relationships based on the Jewish values we hold dear. We can't wait for the next rape or the next sex scandal to jar us into action, because the Jewish tradition has always been clear. Relationships of human contact should be imbued with holiness, sanctity, even godliness. As one Torah commentator points out, God doesn't tell us that we as a Jewish people are holy, but God charges us to become holy. And our actions, from the oldest to the youngest, determine whether we as a people fulfill our purpose of becoming an Am Kadosh, a holy people. Who will teach our children this Jewish value of intimacy and tenderness if we don't teach them? More than ever before, my friends, from an early age, boys need to hear about the wonder of intimacy and the need to practice sexuality with sensitivity and gentleness. Only then will we rid ourselves of the too many twisted concepts of what is considered okay in 2019 and ensure that more of our boys grow up to become real men. Because a real man, in my book, and I think according to everyone here this evening, would only treat any woman with kindness, compassion, and dignity. A real man, as they say, is a mensch, a true gentleman. A real man would have never had sex with that vulnerable woman in Cyprus. And a real man would have helped that 19-year-old British woman come to her senses and find a safe place to be. That would have been something to celebrate. That would have been a hero. That would have been a real man. Tonight, there's one more step we can take. In our Shabbat programs, I put an advertisement called #IamResponsible. It's put on by the Mankind Project. There's a chapter in Israel and really places throughout the world, of course here in the United States as well. And if you go to their website after Shabbat, you'll see they've launched a campaign in response to the Me Too movement called I Am Responsible. And there you'll see a pledge, which each man is asked to make. It's a pledge I plan on having my 2 sons make as well. It's one that I will share with other men in our community and with you tonight. Let me read you this pledge that I invite all of our men to take, no matter their age. Quote, as men, we're committed to individual and collective evolution. We take responsibility for creating the society we want to live in and share for the generations to come. We're responsible for masculinity, for the gentleness, fierce caring, and protection of women, and to look out for the abuse, violence, and domination. We're responsible as creators and as role models. We're responsible as victims and as perpetrators. We recognize the pervasive symptomatic factors that promote abuse of power and teach harmful gender roles to both boys and girls. There's more I need to do as well. As a rabbi, my colleagues, I see Cheryl Eskowitz here, in our religious school and our day school. There's more we all need to do to teach more of our young men here at Beth Yeshurun. We'll continue to do our job and continue to try to do even more. It's a partnership between a synagogue and parents, between religious schools and day schools and a community such as ours, to raise our young men to be real men, to be mensches. I hope you'll join me as we all do our part. Shabbat Shalom, everyone.